Angel Heart Radio. My name is Tibet Shakura Hamon from thrivetherapies.com.au. And today we've got a wonderful show. We've got a great guest on, Shayla Morgansen, who is a writer and author and publisher, and actually more than that. And she's had a wonderful journey and in over the years in getting to this point. And she's got another book coming out, and we're going to be talking to Shayla about her journey and, of course, about her books, but what she's learned along the way. And, it's through success, through her inspired dedication to what she loves has led her to this point. So it's going to be interesting to hear from Shayla and what she has to say. Just quickly, I will do our housekeeping before I introduce Shayla. So here on Angel Heart Radio, the programs are not used to replace your legal, medical, or professional advice or your own sound judgment. Okay, thank you all. So welcome, Shayla, to the show. So great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've known Shayla for quite a few years, and probably for a number of years. We actually haven't physically spoken, but we've watched each other, and I've always admired you and what your journey is, because you started writing when you were 7.
I think, yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
You told me 7, and you've kept writing, haven't you?
Yeah.
And through you've gone to school, you've kept writing, you've gone to high school, university, became a teacher, and then what happened? How did that? Once you were teaching, and you're still writing, and then what happened along the way to make you become a publisher as well? And of course, you're doing a PhD in publishing and editing.
Yes, so it's all kind of an interrelated story, I guess, between points of school and education, and learning, and then around just my passion for writing and storytelling, and the amazing opportunities that have landed in my lap, really, through having my hands open to to the universe at the right moments. So I always loved writing, as far back as I remember. As soon as I could write stories, I was writing stories, and I had the privilege of amazing teachers who saw that and made me know and made me feel like it was something special that was worth investing my time in, and was that deserved the time and the effort that I wanted to put into it. And as I grew through my teens, I knew I wanted to be a writer, but it didn't really sit right with me. There was an expectation, I suppose, from my family that I would continue to achieve, that I would go to university, and it didn't sit right with me to go and study creative writing or English, because I didn't feel like it made me into anything, if that makes sense. Like I thought, you can't study to become a writer. You are a writer when you write. And even though there would have been great benefits to me pursuing that path, I decided instead to study education and become a teacher, and hopefully give back and inspire the way I was inspired by the amazing teachers that I had. So I ended up in teaching. Really, I suppose it was my plan B. I just did it first. And I was really fortunate that my plan B job happened to be perfect for me, and it grew me up so much, taught me so much about people and relationships and responsibility and empathy as well, and what people carry with them.
I guess
and so all throughout this whole time I was writing.
Yeah, I guess that made you a better writer in that respect. You needed life's experiences to shape you in that way, to give you the
So,
fuel, the fodder for your books, for one.
mm,
um, but, you know, it's that maturity of just experience as well that, yeah, gave you all those
so,
things. So
yeah.
when would be the time that you decided to become a writer, that conscious decision?
Um, when I was 10, the teacher I had, the teacher I had,
That's a young
I,
age.
yeah, I was that child that like trails around with the teacher on playground duty and just like asked questions. And I liked the company of adults, and I liked I guess the banter and the stimulation that I got from presenting my ideas to someone who would kind of take me seriously.
Mm,
Um, and one of the other girls in my group asked what she thought we would all be when we grew up. And she said, I think Shayla will be a writer. I think she'll be an author. And it was the first time I thought, oh, that's an actual job that people have. I could have that job. And it just sat in my head ever since that moment. I've met that
yeah.
teacher again since and told her,
Oh,
yeah, and said like this has been because you planted that seed. And then that I think is why I wanted to become a teacher myself, and I wanted to be something
mm.
other than a writer. I wanted to be those people.
Yes, it's good to be multifaceted in that way. You know, you don't narrow your experience down. It's interesting, you know, it shows how significant, you know, adults around us, and particularly teachers and parents, but uh, shape can help shape or help you believe in yourself. It was there anyway, by the sounds of it. It was like you were born to be this. I don't
Yeah,
think you were going to escape it, no matter what, whatever you did. So,
no,
you know, you may have had other lives doing this, and it's come through very strong for such an early age to know this is what you
I think
want to
so.
do.
And
Yeah.
those people, the there's something I remember from every teacher that I had, especially in primary school, in my first few years of
Mm.
schooling. There's something that each of them gave me, whether it was um, one teacher had this beautiful library of Spot and Clifford books, and I loved the way she arranged them on her shelf. That was my first teacher. And then my second teacher would let us meditate to
Wow.
a, a cassette tape of nature sounds and rain. And then at the end of the tape, we'd stand up without saying anything. And this is at 6 years old, and go to our desks and just write whatever had come to our mind. And that's still what I do now. I play sounds, I play music to write. And that's what I've done in my own teaching practice. And it has worked
Mm.
for a lot of other busy, creative young minds like
Yes.
what.
What imagine if, you know, all students were able to do that, the creativity and probably, you know, the calmness, it would, you know, positively affect so many kids in so many ways, and
Oh, it
how
does.
the classrooms run as well, what happens, their energy, everything, and the mind as well, what they can take in. So yeah, it's wonderful how that inspired you. So
Yeah.
what led you, did you have an idea of what you wanted to write? What was your favorite thing to write about back then?
I think my stories have always been pretty similar. There was like a uh, in the middle, there was a really long horses phase. I loved horses, and I read every book, uh, like Pony Pals and Saddle Club and all of those. And but I didn't really maybe write a lot of that, except for myself, because I was just obsessed with horses and unicorns. But once I guess all the way through that, and once I grew out of that, what I really love is magic um, in all its forms and all the ways that people interpret that. And all the movies that I remember watching as a kid had this kind of speculative, otherworldly aspect to them. So the movies of my childhood were things like Labyrinth and Stargate, and these stories that took people to these awe-inspiring places. And the feeling that I got the first time I saw those movies was what I wanted to learn how to make other people feel. And I don't know whether I've achieved that yet, or whether that's something that I'm going to keep on trying to do for my whole life. But those feelings are of being able to transport somebody else, were very motivating for me in making me want to tell stories.
Well, that's a big thing. That's why we go to movies. That's why we read books. We all want to be transported somewhere to be out. We get so invested in a story that, we forget about ourselves. And, they're such great teachers in so many ways. And I know in your bio, you've put like your book themes of fate versus choice, and ethics versus consequences, duty versus loyalty, chasing dreams, putting in the work, and creating opportunities. They're very good values, or teaching for even younger people, or anyone really. And that's been a solid thing throughout your books. Even I've got Shayla's first one here, I read years ago, actually. That's a great book chosen. That's the Elm
The Elmstone Saga.
Saga, sorry. Yeah, this is the first one. So there's a series of, like, the fifth one's coming out, so they all follow on. But this runs through the whole saga, doesn't it? That sort of theme. It's not just romantic. It's very practical.
Yeah, most of the most of what I write, and most of the films and stories that I've loved, I love movies, but I'm a big reader as well, and the books that really stand out for me from, like, in my formative years, were things like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Harry Potter, and The Lord of the Rings, and Arthur C. Clarke's 2001: Space Odyssey, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I love these big, broad, magical, wonderful worlds, and if there was romance in them, it was really downplayed. It really was never the central
Yes.
plot. And I think that I've enjoyed, or I suppose I've simulated that, or carried that across into my stories, because that's how real life looks to me. Like, most of the people that we love, most of the meaningful relationships in our lives aren't our romantic relationships. Those are important, and those are special, and there's so many other writers out there doing a way better job at telling romance stories than what I would. So I'm telling the stories of other loves and other relationships.
Yes. Well, you actually do have a romantic story of your own with your husband. You just want
to we
just
do.
briefly.
I'm such a skeptic. Like, I read these, like, romance stories, or particularly young adult. Most of what I read is young adult. I like the pace of younger audience books, and they so frequently have, like, love triangles, or they have these really predictable tropes, what I feel are really predictable tropes. And they have this kind of they have this trope where the main character is 17, and then she meets this boy at school, and they fall in love, and then they have this big adventure together, and then usually by 18 she's married, or her whole life is set up, and then the story just ends, and we're supposed to assume that that's it, that she's done everything important now, and luckily there's a really beautiful man who's going to look after her. And I just despise that story as a message to teenage girls finishing school, that success at that age means having already found the person that you're supposed to be with. I find a little uncomfortable. As someone who works with young people, I understand the responsibility, I suppose, writing for young people and knowing the messages that I'm putting out there. So I read those kind of books and I think to myself, like, no one meets the love of their life at 16 and 17 and then is just done with their life. Like, and then I think, oh, I'm married to my high school sweetheart.
That's right. It does happen. Not to everyone, but it has happened to you.
And I'm so lucky that it's happened to me, and it's been a magical, fortuitous thing that as we've both grown up, we haven't grown apart.
Yes.
And that's not going to be the way for every relationship in high school, as much as it feels like that at the time.
It takes a lot of work. Relationships are everyday working on type thing, and that's what I like. You've got this practicality even in your books. There can be love, but it's what's real as well. It's not just pure fantasy. Even though you're a fantasy writer,
yes,
your books. That's what I was impressed with the book, is you've brought the practical with the so-called magical together. And it makes it seem real. Like, oh, well, it is. I know it is, but that's what I liked that you did. It made it everyday sort of occurrence, and set in a modern time.
Yes. When you and I worked together, I remember my interview to start there, and I was asked about like things I was interested in, and I said, "Oh, I'm very interested in like cells and biology and science, but I'm also really interested in dreams and magic and creativity, and I need to find a way to, I suppose, reconcile all these broad interests that I have, and that seems so far afield in terms of like on a spectrum of interests. And as someone who, like, I refer to myself as a skeptic, but I'm also this dreamer and this believer. And for my mind, because I just lie in bed just thinking about these stories, about these magic systems, there needs to be a system. There needs to be some grounding and some reality for me to write it, to feel like I could be there.
Yes.
A story where people can just say a magic word and then the room fills with cupcakes. I can't write a story in that world because I can't work out how that could ever happen. But then in writing the Elmstone saga, I got to create my own magic system and draw on understandings that I already had about how energy works and how energy transfers and transforms, and make that my magic, because that felt like something that could be happening in the room next door, and that wouldn't compromise the reality that I'm living or the person at the house next door is living. I can write this story and pretend it's happening right here, and I don't have to ignore any of the little voices in my head saying like that couldn't happen.
Well, yeah, how you wrote it could seem very easily how things could happen, and that's what I enjoyed, you bringing those two elements together, the practical and the magical together. And I think it brings it together for people that go, oh, well, maybe these things could happen. And I know you researched a lot of things as well, so there is that in there. So yes, and working, Shayla and I worked in a store that where there were lots of a new age store basically, and I actually did readings there and other people, and there were many interesting and wonderful people used to come in. So and things would happen. So I can understand where you got some of your ideas from in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. But life itself gives you these ideas, and it's whether you're working at a book or something else creative, even art or whatever. the fact that you just kept going and obviously matured and grew and expanded on what you knew and allowed life to show you things, I think is a testament in that way. And even to the fact of making decisions for yourself on how you change your life.
Yeah.
Definitely. And when you, like, you're still teaching, but you're doing more of your own work. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I reached this point in teaching where I, I love teaching, and um, I had been working on my book, my series, Chosen, and its first sequel, Scarred, and I finished them when I just finished my undergraduate, so before I actually started teaching. And then once I began teaching, it's quite an intense job. And I don't know how to do it any other way other than 150% and throw myself into it. But I I started editing those first two books and working on that, and working out how I was going to get them published. And it 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 was hard to be able to move into continue to write when I was also uh, when I was also teaching full time and putting so much of my energy into that. And I kind of got into this sort of stalemate with myself, that I was not pursuing my dream because I was devoting all of my energy into what was supposed to be plan B. But plan B was important to me as well, and it still is. It had become something very important, and it's people's children,
Mm.
and their lives, and those relationships are important. So when I was doing the job, I needed to, for myself, to be able to give my whole self. But then when I wasn't at work, I felt like there was nothing left of myself
Mm.
to be able to put into this dream. And so I had to kind of look at what my life looked like, and where I wanted it to be in 5, 10, 20 years, and see the trajectory that I was on. And what I ended up doing was having to, and this is actually my defense mechanism for lots of things. It's not actually probably a great way to go about it, which is that I added something else to the plate, and I started a master's in editing and publishing, to get the knowledge and the skills that I would need to pursue publishing my books, and also to create future work opportunities for myself if I didn't intend to be a teacher forever. It didn't seem likely that I would go from 5 days a week in a classroom one week and then writing full time the next week.
No, it doesn't happen like that.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen that
And
way.
not everyone could be an editor, though, that thing, or a publisher. So how did you sort of think that you could do this? What was in you that thought, yeah, this is for me?
My dad had always said he thought I would be an editor. So that he could see how that aligned, I suppose, with the skills that I had. And I'm someone who leans over someone's shoulder when they're reading a letter and it's a full page, and I go, oh, they're missing an apostrophe right there. And it's the first thing that I see, and it's a curse because I see it everywhere. And I've always been like this. And my family would, when I was a teenager, and then when I was a teacher, would have me look over emails or documents. The other job I was doing at the same time that I was working with you in the shop, that was when I was doing my undergraduate degree. I had a second job as well, working in an indoor playground. I've always done many things at once. I don't know how to not.
I don't know how you do it all. I really don't.
I don't actually know how I managed back then, actually, when I think, I'm like, there's two jobs and full-time study, and I was writing my books. I don't know how I fit it in. But my boss there would get me to proofread things before sending them out, just because it was, maybe I pointed out too many incorrect things, and he took notice and then utilized that skill. So it had been something that I was already, I suppose, already doing, and then teaching the age that I taught, which was junior, early childhood primary school, is ages about 4 to 8, and the language concepts and literacy that gets taught to that age and that those children are growing into, was so enriching as well for me in teaching me why we use language the way we do, because I knew where I was supposed to put an apostrophe. I could look at someone else's letter and be like, there's all the mistakes, but I couldn't before that always explain why. And having to explain to a 5-year-old that their spelling is wrong, even though water sounds like it has an O and a U on the end, because it's water, and then having to explain that, the sounds don't always match the letters that we've been taught to associate them with. And that helped really solidify my understandings of language. And I know that I apply that now as an editor. Not that I talk down to clients and treat them like 5-year-olds, but
No.
that because of that, I know why it needs to be there, and I can explain that in an empathetic way that I didn't know why before. I had to explain it to a 5-year-old, but I know it now and I can tell it to these people.
That's good. Well, I mean, because you're teaching, you're lecturing at uni as well. That's correct. Yeah. So all these things, it's wonderful how you've followed your intuition and gone with what you felt that you needed to do for your life. And then that's what all of us can do if we're in touch with that, going for that intuition. The feeling will lead you to these paths no matter what you do. And also, there's a question. Do you always want to write about fantasy? Is there anything else that really interests you that you would like to write about?
So yes and no. Yes, I can't imagine not writing fantasy or science fiction, but also no, I don't think I write about fantasy and science fiction. I think I use fantasy and science fiction to write about the things that I actually want to explore. So all of the things I think I've probably ever written I really write for myself. And it just so happens that once I finish writing for myself, I need to clean it up and turn it into a product that somebody else will want to read. So there's kind of 2 books inside each of my books. There's the book I want to tell, and then there's the story I want others to take from it. And when I'm writing, the story that I'm telling is an exploration of themes or concepts that I'm exploring, that I'm needing to understand as I grow.
Yes.
Yeah. So each of my books, I think people who know me have commented that reading through the series, they can kind of see me growing up and the things that I was dealing with and things like that at the time, because writing is kind of its own therapy. It's its own way of learning about the world and about my place in it. And I just use my characters as vessels, and they use magic.
Yes, that's right. Or what we call magic, yes. And I guess that's the thing. There's so many people, and there's many people I've sort of come in contact with, and writing is something that is within them, whether they write an actual book, but even just the writing in itself is such a therapy So if anyone, ever thinks it's a waste, it's not really, because as you said, you've learned a lot about yourself in this whole process. I mean, writing and doing all that you've done would have taught you so much about yourself. And things you've learned. So I guess you would become more at peace with yourself in that way of who you are as a person, even at 32, which is soon, 31, which is, quite amazing to do all the things that you've done. And yet there's a lot more to go. Like, you're only that age, and, you've got a long life ahead of you. And it's thinking about, what else will I write about? How will that expand?
So this series is, I suppose the genre is urban fantasy. So it's magic, but it's based in contemporary world, and the characters, they have cell phones. They some of them have jobs. Some of them drive cars. Like it exists in the same world that we exist, but there's a layer of magic on top of it. And that's really where most of my story takes place. It's kind of separate from that. And the conflicts arise when those two or more settings clash. But this series is also winding up in that it's a 6-book series, and the 5th one comes out on the 29th of May. And then the final story I hope to have out for 2022. But this isn't my whole creative career is not just writing the one series. I have multiple other inspirations and stories that I want to tell, or I am telling that I've written, and I'm waiting for the right opportunity to release those and share those with readers as well. But they're all, I guess, under the banner of what gets called speculative fiction. So something that asks what if, and lets the story find that out. And there's always magic. There's always something.
Yes. So as we sort of going more into the futuristic sort of modern age with all technology, do you think you'll go into a bit more science fiction as such?
Yeah, I have, I suppose, a multi-genre series that I hope to launch later this year, and it's more urban, and I suppose I'm seeing it as like an X-Files supernatural kind of vibe. Like the characters are looking at the kind of things that were in that. So monsters, I can't say too much because
No, of course not.
haven't started marketing that one, or sort of warming my audience up to the fact that there might be a different series. But I also love anything with spaceships. I'm in love with spaceships. If I could go into space, it would just be be the best thing.
It would be. I'd like them to get a bit more sophisticated before I could go. I think that's what you have to deal with now. But yes. So what wouldn't you write about? What disinterests you so much that you wouldn't write about it?
I really struggle to write nonfiction. I struggle to read nonfiction, and that's really hard because I'm slowly working my way through a doctorate, which is just masses of reading nonfiction and research, and that's why it's taking me quite some time. I like politics, so I can imagine myself potentially writing like political thrillers, but then I suppose there'd need to be a spaceship in there somewhere, or a monster tied up.
Comes and get all the leaders and take them to another planet or something.
Yeah. I really admire mystery writers, but I don't know that I have the patience to kind of to put all the ducks in a row the way that they do. I think that it's a really cool talent.
I think you have patience.
Maybe
When you
it's
look
not.
back, you've kept going this for many years. A lot of
I,
people, like these days, it's about, overnight success, instant fame, all this sort of thing. But you've just kept going. That's what I have admired. That you've just step by step, year by year, you've just kept writing, 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 and you followed that feeling, that passion in you. So that's, I feel it's like this is what anyone can do when you just keep at something and you've got the dedication to it.
yeah, I suppose. I tend to think of myself as quite an impatient person. Um, but then I suppose I think dedication is probably a different thing. Um, so I'm dedicated to what I want and to the outcomes that I want, and I'm prepared to wait for the delayed gratification, which I think writing teaches you a lot about. Um, and probably most um, creative outlets teach you that. Like when if you want to be a dancer and you walk into a ballet studio, you do not look like a swan the first time
No.
you spin around. And if you want to be a musician, you just sound like someone whacking drums really hard the first time, and there's no rhythm. You have to learn these things, and it's worth it because the um, what starts to take shape, what you're creating, um, becomes steadily more beautiful and more you the more you work on it.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of other things like that, like dancing, like the
mm,
piano keyboard I have in the next room that I haven't had time to learn. I wish I did, but
yeah.
because it's not my passion. I don't need to sit down at that piano every day,
No.
so I don't. Because I'm not patient enough to
Yeah.
wait it out. I need that desire, that
Yes.
that pull.
How do you deal with writer's block? I know many people would suffer from that, and I've done the same. It's like this block, and you just go, how do I get it back?
Okay, I have a few answers for that, I suppose. And one is I've heard so many very productive creatives kind of slam the idea of writer's block and say it doesn't happen. It's a profession, and if if you're a doctor, doctors don't get doctor's block, and teachers don't get teacher's block, which I'd probably argue. Um, there are days, but I also think that writing and like most creative things is different
Mm,
from those professions. You can treat them like those professions, and you can be wildly successful and productive at that. And I admire those people and their work ethic, but it's not that way for me. So I do feel that I've experienced writer's block, but because I work on a lot of different things at the same time, and I write a lot of stories at once, if I'm what writer's block looks like to me is that I'll hit a scene and just not know how to get the characters out of it, or forget what it was I wanted out of that scene, and therefore not be able to finish it in a satisfying way and pull away. And that can happen for months. And every time I open that document, I just look at it and think, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And the options in that instance are just to not write, which doesn't feel like an option, or to write something else. Because I
okay.
could persevere. I could just write words
Mm,
and then, just force myself through that scene. But I also know from experience that the next day when I open that document, or in a month from then when I open that document, I will delete all those words because
mm.
they'll be ugly and forced, and
Yeah.
they won't fit, and I won't like them later. And
No.
that's happened to me too many times to do that
I,
anymore.
I I guess it's just like trying to just let go for a while and it will come back. I just have to say, sorry, everyone, I've lost chat, but if you want to make some comments on the Angel Heart Radio page, I will answer them, or I'll get the answers off Shayla. So we will get back to you. So please ask some questions and comments. Yes, having a creative block is not a good feeling at all. So everyone, I guess, will have their own way of dealing with that. Yeah, there could be numerous ways, but yeah, walking away, I think, is certainly one thing. And you tend to get clearer when you come back, when you just
Yeah.
distract yourself with something else. But
I
it's hard
distract
when it
myself
goes
with a lot
on.
of writing though, and I see that as keeping my tools sharp. Because I could just walk away from writing, and I wouldn't like it, but maybe it would, I guess it would free up whatever that block is, and give me some space to remove the emotion from it.
Mm.
Um, if I'm working on something else, I'm still developing as a writer, and I'm finding out new things about myself and about different characters. And I tend to think that the discoveries I make through story B, um, in the time span that I'm taking a break from story A, are can only be beneficial to the Shayla that returns to story A when I'm
Yeah.
ready,
Mm.
as opposed to someone who just takes 2 months off from writing.
Yes. Do you get inspiration like from animals or nature, like just things that happen in your stories? Does that go into your story at all,
Um, Not
other than
specifically,
people?
but I walk. I walk in the afternoons to, um, I think of it as like, I call it stretching my eyes, stretching my mind. um, so I write, and then when the sun is going down and it's not so ridiculously hot, um, I go for a walk and touch trees, pick up leaves, stop and look at fairy rings if there's mushrooms. And I'm sure that people in my neighborhood just think I'm like that crazy lady that just wanders around and like actually touches flowers and smells all the flowers, because the my office, I love my office where I sit and write, but it's the same sensory experience every time I sit there,
Mm.
except I create on the page. So I go for my walk, and that frees up my mind. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just letting all those ideas sort of coalesce and get some space in between them. And then, yeah, I like to, I suppose, just reset myself on
Mm.
a sensory
Yeah.
level. One of my crazy quirks.
No, I think getting in nature, like you do have a connection. So I always feel that feeds you somehow, even if it's not straight away. There's something in that
Yeah,
that stimulates creativity because it's the earth, it's living, all the living things that are there. So yeah, I can understand that would be quite interesting. Does Matt, your husband, ever give you any inspiration or ideas or you know good criticism? What's the word? Constructive.
he is. I don't know if he's watching this. He he's a very slow reader. He wasn't someone who loved language and reading and writing as a child. So even though he loves stories, and we watch a lot of like long form television together, um, getting him to read my stuff is like pulling teeth. But then once he is reading it, he loves gives me the best feedback. Like tells
Yes.
me exactly what he liked, and what um, the connections he sees between the things that we've spoken about or the experiences we've had, that he sees that connected um, in my storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, he also one of his interests is martial arts, and that's something that I've never had the opportunity or the time maybe to explore. And I love the occasional fight scene in my stories. I like um, characters like getting into these like brief like physical altercations where I can sort of flip the scene around and it becomes very dynamic. But I'm not a very kinesthetic person. I'm someone who's very much in my head. So I've actually thanked him specifically for this in the acknowledgements of my next book. There are just times when it's late at night and I'm writing and I just hit one of these scenes and I'm like, I don't know what this looks like. So I just drift downstairs and interrupt whatever he's doing, watching TV or working or something, and we'll just say like, I need for you to just block out this scene with me because I need to work out how this character gets from this side of the room to that side, and there's a table there, and it's really important that there's a third person here. And
well, that's good. You've got someone. It's always good to have someone else's energy to help you in that way, and you know, advise you what they think, all that sort of thing. Because, you know, are you able to take that advice from other people? Has it helped you, you know, shape your writing and things like that?
I think yes. He would probably say no. Yeah.
Fair enough. So
yeah.
what advice would you give someone who, you know, is thinking of writing and it's like, oh, it seems so daunting, or, you know, they haven't got the talent, or la la la,
Yeah.
you know?
I don't know how to. I don't know that I have specific advice for someone who feels like they don't have the talent, because that's something that I've been so fortunate to have never had people in my life let me doubt that. And I don't know that I have advice that can replace a support network, other than finding those people, that tribe, that can make you feel like you believe in yourself.
I guess it's a passion. If there's a passion in there, it can help drive that, and that belief in oneself, would you say, is the biggest thing?
Like a perpetuating cycle. Like the passion that I have for my writing inspires other people to believe that, oh, maybe she is all right, maybe she is good. I don't know. But then that makes me feel like, yeah, I've convinced these people I must be all right. Like they wouldn't just say that if it wasn't true. But maybe we're all lying to each other. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's good. It's good for me. And I imagine that would be that's, I suppose, what creatives need. I think we need a network. We need community. We need people who will let us believe in our passions and our purpose.
I guess the biggest thing is just starting to write, putting pen to paper. It's like an artist, just that first paint. Yeah. It's like, well, but once you just start and allow.
And it doesn't matter if no one sees it. Like most of the words that I've ever written are still on my hard drive or in notebooks that are probably in recycling by now, or on floppy disks that are in some drawer at my parents' place, from when I was little and we had floppy disks. Most things that I've written weren't for other people, they're for me. And if I hadn't written those, I wouldn't now be writing for other people. But my journey has been from a little girl writing in notepads for myself to when I hit my teens, I kind of hit like a very long writer's block, what we were speaking about before, but it's the longest that I've ever had, where the concepts that I wanted to write about, I didn't have the skill to explore, and I went to writing fan fiction, and writing online, under just like a pen name, like a username. And the upside to that was that I was writing for an audience for the first time, but they didn't know who I was. So I could experiment. I could
Yes.
push beyond what I'd been doing with the with what I was writing in my notebooks and as a child. But if I'm tripped over and made mistakes, or went too far with a concept, or did something that really was very inelegant, that I wouldn't want people to associate with me, it didn't matter. Like, you get the feedback and you use that, and you develop an understanding of the difference between feedback that's just mean and feedback that is actually has something in it that you can use. So I did that for many years, and I still fall back to that when I'm in, as we were saying, when I'm in writer's block. I write fan fiction, and that just gives me a bit of freedom from the expectations that I have on Shayla,
Yeah.
because I don't have those expectations on my pen name.
Yes.
I do one edit, I reread what I wrote, and I'm like, it's for the internet. They can rip it apart if they want.
Teaches you to have a thicker skin and not worry about judgment in any way.
And sometimes I think I write so much better for those stories, and for those experiments than what I do in my own books, because in my own books I'm very careful that and very precise, and I want a specific outcome, and so I guess I impose a lot on my own creativity, whereas when I write for an internet audience without my real name, I just go for it. And the feedback that I have gotten from that, and the validation, has been worth any like occasional mean comments that I got, and it's freed me from a lot of fear.
Well, maybe there's going to be a book that you may write in that way.
Maybe, yeah. I think it's taught me a lot, and it's made the books that I write better, because it gives me tools that I wouldn't otherwise have had, and I've tested them on an audience who also aren't using their real names, and been told, like, this works, that doesn't. Like, okay, I know now, and then I can take what worked and do it again better,
Yeah.
in a more refined way, for my novels.
So it's really, if anyone wants, looking at writing, it's just start and, find groups to get involved with and just experiment and learn as you go, like everyone else
Yeah,
has.
I think
So,
baby steps, like,
yeah, baby steps. Yeah.
write for you, then find, fan fiction and online writing that isn't going to be for everybody. But for me, it was a middle ground between writing just for me and writing for a public audience in a way that I could be judged. I found that as a way, but for others, that might be critique groups, or it might be sometimes you can get involved in, like, online communities where everyone writes. You agree on a story, and you might write the first part and then email it to the next person. That's been going on for decades. I'm not sure where you'd find something like that. I've not really been involved in it, but there's ways that you can make
There's
it work
ways.
for you.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got, how can people find your books on your website? Is that the only place at this
Yeah,
point?
it's a good central place. They're available online, and as both paperback and as ebooks.
All
They
right.
start
Yep.
with Chosen, the one that you showed before, and that's book one, and then they're sequential. They progress through the series, and book five, Fractured, is coming out on the 29th of May. So my website is just shaylamorgansen.com, and from there you can find links to all the major online retailers, and they're available internationally.
That's great. Well, that's a credit to you, Shayla,
Thank you.
to get this far and do all those things. I hope this has given some inspiration to other people if they've ever thought of writing, or even just for the joy of it, whether you publish anything or not, it doesn't matter. It's what you get out of the writing for yourself, and how that, people can write about all sorts of things. It's therapeutic, doesn't have to go anywhere, or if they've got ideas, it doesn't really matter. And the fact that you've started publishing yourself is really, an amazing thing as well. So, yeah, that's another story in itself, I guess. But yeah, we're running out of time now. Time's gone very quickly.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so today, after we leave here, you're going to be writing?
Yeah, probably. Or reading. I've had a big weekend of writing, and sometimes when I've had a big outpouring, I kind of need to refill with other people's amazing words and ideas.
Yes. But yeah, it's a great journey, and I'm sure in another 40 years you'll be still writing easily. So, yeah, it will be interesting, where you go from here. Yeah, more books, more teaching.
Yep.
No long-term plans, no definite plans for you in certain ways that you've thought of, other than what you're doing right now?
I think, yeah, I think my life will continue to look different. It will always be a creative life, and it will always be a life that's carried by learning, whether that's, or probably not whether, but both my learning and the ways I can help others to learn as well.
That's great. Well, it's an interesting life, and filled with, that passion for what you want to do. So that creates happiness inside, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that I know what it is that gives me that sense of purpose, and I know that for others, that finding that is the journey. But if you even suspect that writing is that for you, there's nothing to be lost by starting to write and see where it takes you.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's been great to talk to you, and I hope, sure you've inspired some people out there today who are listening, and we'll hope to chat again soon. So thank you all for being here, and as I say, any comments, we'll certainly get back to you, and you've got Shayla's website there. I've put it in the chat, so you can contact her. Okay. Well, thanks again. Good. Bye, everyone. We'll see you in a fortnight. Bye for now.